Alright, so I wanted to go over some changes that I made to the VR character and display tags especially. I added display tags to all of the interactable components and actors because I wanted to give a flexible method for people to add their own behaviors without me adding more to the plugin itself. So like this gun here, I've added a lot more gameplay tags to it. So the gun's set to drop type on side grip, secondary drop types on trigger. I mean, you could just change it by clicking on a new tag and now it'll drop on side grip and on trigger. Grip type, it grips on trigger, secondary grips on trigger, you could change that too. Use type, you can use it on trigger or on grip, and end use also can have on grip release or on trigger release. So in this, on end use should be on trigger release. Although I could probably combine use types into, if it takes on trigger, then it just does on trigger release as well. But I won't worry about that. That tag doesn't matter. So basically, grip behavior with that gun is now entirely based off of the gameplay tags. So it's use buttons and drop and grip buttons are all defined by gameplay tags on it now. So each individual item, you can individually set how it behaves. Like this potion mesh has its own gameplay tags. And there's defaults under this new VR character, which I've renamed to VR character 2. Under gripping, variables, gripping. So default grip tag is on trigger. So by default, objects are gripped by trigger. Drop is on trigger release. Secondary drop tag is on side grip. Secondary grip type is on trigger, so on, so on. Like I said, I'll probably combine use and end use because I don't see a point in using two different buttons for on end use and use itself. But I'll deal with that later. The plugin doesn't have to be used like that. It's just for this template. I wanted the template, since a lot of people are using it directly for projects, to be as flexible as possible. Especially since people have been trying to update the template itself as I release updates to it into their projects. And it's a little difficult because I can change the backend and they might have to merge blueprint nodes or something. So this way they can just directly define behavior on objects like that. Last update, I added advanced physics to the grip settings, which if you turn it on, it uses advanced physics settings. You can change the physics constraint type from an acceleration constraint, which is this one, where it uses acceleration, so it doesn't matter the mass of the object, it's going to follow along with you. And now, you can also set it to force constraint, which manipulates forces on it instead. So if you wanted to simulate weight on an object, you can change it to force constraint, and then the more mass it has, the more it'll delay around. And you notice how the angular isn't behaving correctly in this state? It's because angular force is way different than angular acceleration, which is also why I added custom angular values that you can set so that you can manipulate angular forces separate from linear now. Before I just had it set as a multiplier, but multipliers don't cover every instance. So I added this so people could directly control angular force better. Now it has no dampening, so it's going to behave weird, but alright. Turn all these back to normal. What I intend to do next is add a grip at center of mass option in here. I mean, it already grips with center of mass, but what I want to do is I want to add the set center of mass to grip position. So let's say if you were in the current setup picking up a sword or something. Since it grips at center of mass to keep the physics as stable as possible, you'll be gripping at the center of the blade. So when you bring it, holding at the hilt down to here, it's going to revolve around the center of mass, not around the grip location. But if I set it to center of mass is where your grip location is, then you'll correctly use the hilt. There's been a few people that have done like sword type stuff already with this, and one of them, he solved it just by setting the center of mass on his sword mesh to the hilt where his grip socket is. And that works, and it's clean, but I wanted to offer a way to automatically do it for people and then set back after the grip is ended. So you wouldn't have the inconsistent behavior of it revolving around the center of mass. It would more easily push off this table here because it would be revolving around where the hand is instead. Alright. Other things I added. I'll go to the Vive Pawn character real quick. Alright, so I changed up the sockets a little bit. Sockets before were just a single socket, and you chose between them by it finds the closest primary socket in range. And that was a little inflexible for some situations, like say a mug somebody had as an example, where he wanted it to flip on the opposite hand, and he could manually do that, but it's a little hard to do correctly. So instead, I don't know why that node's there. It's not necessary. So instead what I'm doing is I've updated the plugin so closest primary slot in range now takes an override prefix. So when it's searching for slots within range, if you send an override prefix to it, it'll use that socket prefix instead of the default ones. So then I added this function, get correct primary slot prefix. And first it checks for separate hand sockets on the mesh or object. And if it has per hand sockets, that's true. Then it checks separate touch sockets. And this is for Oculus Touch because the rotation of the controller is different. You actually have to remove the gun pitch that I have for Vive because you hold it already in a gun position. So then it checks for touch sockets. If it is touch sockets, then it changes on headset type. And if the headset is DT Oculus Rift and has per hand sockets, then we'll return VR Grip Touch left hand, VR Grip Touch right hand, or just VR Grip Touch. And if it doesn't have per hand sockets, it's just VR Grip Touch. That way you can have separate Oculus Touch. Where is it? I didn't even go in there. You can have separate Oculus Touch snap points on meshes. Like here, under sockets now, I have VR Grip Touch P1, so primary 1. So if it detects that you're using an Oculus Rift, then it'll automatically use that socket instead of the primary VR Grip P1, which has the angular rotation on it. And I could have taken the pitch and just unrotated it by that 70 degrees that I have on here, which is about what the Oculus controller has. But there's situations where that might not work correctly for what you're trying to do, so I wanted to just extend the socket system instead. So that'll allow you to have sockets per hand and per hardware as well. And I've moved a lot of these. Where's my display graph? I've moved a lot of these things into their own functions. Like cycle movement modes isn't in the event graph anymore; it's in its own function, so you can override it at will. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And a lot of other functions are now overridable over here, and they're all sorted correctly now. Get correct primary slot prefix being one of them. On the event graph, I am now getting headset type to this is SteamVR. So I'm getting HMD type, which is the standard node to do that. Epic has their own version of this node, but it returns the same thing. So I haven't bothered to remove this yet. And it returns these values. And here's the problem. Bash, what are you doing? One sec, my dog's playing toys. Alright. Come on, give it to me. Alright. So the problem with SteamVR is how Epic currently handles it. It just returns HDMI type DT SteamVR when using SteamVR plugin. And that's a problem because if you're using Oculus Rift, it still returns DT SteamVR and doesn't tell you which hardware it's using. So it's kind of difficult to choose between like Touch or Vive Wands or Knuckles or whatever off of that enum. And a lot of people go and have it, so there's like an options menu where you can switch between them. But something else you can do is, since I've exposed the OpenVR device property system, you can go in and get VR device property string, and prop tracking system name string will get you what tracking system it uses. So in this case, if tracking system name string is Lighthouse, then you know it's an Oculus Rift because that's the only thing that's currently on it. Now, I would like to go in, instead of basing this off of device ID 0, base it off of HMD. I don't know, it's a track device. Get valid track device IDs for controller. And you can just check for larger than 0 and get first version of it. But I'll just get first right now. So I'll get a copy of the first. This is the device ID of the very first controller that's currently connected. So you can plug that into there, and then you can go down to here, and you can do. I think it's model number string. Device ID string. Yeah, I think it's model number string. And you'll actually get what type of track controller you have. So that would directly tell you if it's touch or Vive wands or Knuckles controllers without you having to do anything. But for now, since I don't have touch and I don't know the values of those on that, and also there's only Vive wands currently, Knuckles not out yet, I'm just checking if it's a Lighthouse tracking environment, and if it is, then I'm setting headset type to Oculus Rift. And then I use that headset type under get correct primary slot prefix, where I choose the different socket names. So that'll evolve later when I get more information about these device strings, and I start working it off of the controller device ID instead of the HMD. But I mean, for now, that's functional, and this will work regardless of if it's Steam VR or not. Because if it's Steam VR, it'll always do this, and if it's not Steam VR, then it'll just set headset type to this. And this works without Steam VR plugin enabled, so it should be functional. Alright, I added some other things. I changed climbing slightly. It's not much to talk about. On step up on climbing, I added a little camera fade. It's no big deal. I mean, most of this has all just been getting all these nodes a little cleaner, deleting extra ones, making the event graph not as cluttered. The big one is I changed grip or drop or use object. It used to be just on trigger, and I made it input agnostic now off of using gameplay tags. So you can take any button, it doesn't have to be trigger. I have this set to grip 2 on grip pressed and released, and then we have on trigger pressed and released, and it passes in the motion controller, other controller, whether it can start climbing or not. So only trigger is currently able to start climbing, the grab sphere that it's using, and then what button it is. So this is on trigger, on trigger, on trigger. These are the gameplay tags you search on an object to see if it can be picked up with this function call. And trigger activated can never end use, so it doesn't have anything that's void. And then secondary on trigger, on trigger. That way you can pass any button in, and as long as you set up gameplay tags for it and the object matches those gameplay tags, then you can pick it up using that button or drop it or whatever. So this is now button agnostic. It doesn't care what button you're using as long as you set the variables correctly. That means all of the dropping and gripping functions are now just this function. This function handles gripping, dropping, removing secondary attachments, adding secondary attachments, and starting climbing all by itself. So there's a lot less functions inside the character regarding gripping. I mean, we still have the call correct grab event, so it does client side or server side depending on if it's a local grip or not. But here's the big one: validate gameplay tag. So this is a new one where it takes a base tag. So it will say grip type has a base tag, and is gameplay tag valid for the gameplay tag we're searching for? If it's not, then we might as well just return it didn't match, or if it's equal to the default tag, then it didn't match. And it'll never be equal to the default tag because it's invalid. And then if it has the gameplay tag base tag, so if it has gripping on the object, then we continue on, check the rest of the tags. If it doesn't, we return. If it has matching gameplay tag the one you're searching for, then it'll return true, it matched your default, and otherwise it'll return false. So the way this works is if you're passing in a gameplay tag you're searching for, it'll check the object to see if it's, you know, on grip trigger. So if it matches that on grip trigger, it'll return true. If instead it doesn't have an on grip trigger, it'll check if the base tag on the base tag, default tag, then it'll check if this is on grip trigger and default tag is on grip trigger and the object doesn't have the base tag, which is on grip, then it'll just assume that you didn't set the gameplay tag on the object and it'll grip on this because the default tag matches the base tag. So that's how I implement the default pickups. So by default, this default value, default grip tag is on trigger. So any object that doesn't have a pickup tag assigned to it, so if we took this and we just removed grip type on trigger, it would still work with on trigger because that's the default one. So this is what makes all of the gameplay tags work with all the pickup and stuff. Somebody asked me on the forums, I believe, about overriding functions. So what I would suggest that people do if they wanted to directly use these characters instead of just using them as examples of blueprint nodes is take your character, create a child blueprint class, and then you have your character with a clean slate. And if you wanted to change something on it, since everything is basically in functions now, we'll go to override function, can object be climbed. So we're going to override can this object be climbed, which is a new function I added. So the parent can object be climbed basically says if it gets hit by the VR trace channel, then yes, this can be climbed. So it can climb everything that collides with VR trace. So object to check into parent, can climb, returns can climb. So you can leave it default functionality, or you can say something like object to check cast to mesh component, and if it is a mesh component, then return node can be climbed. If it is not, then return can climb. So you can always climb mesh components or something like that. Or you could just take out parent entirely, do your own logic in here. But that's an easy way now to be able to say, you know, only objects with this interface, only objects with this type can be climbed instead of the entire world being climbable. So that's the basics of overriding. You literally just select on a child class, override the function you want to override, and modify logic on it. I removed the tablet because it was useless. It's just to show how the camera works, and I don't really need to show how the camera works. No one's using it. I don't think anyone uses the camera interface in OpenVR for any game on any platform. The functionality is there, but there's no point in having that extra stuff in the character. The procedural mesh system, which is where it gets the VR device model and texture and fills in the procedural meshes to show what controllers you're using. Epic is directly handling that in the next engine update, 4.17. They actually are implementing this themselves. So I will get rid of all these because I didn't fully flesh it out anyways. Because it wasn't used that much and it was basic. And a lot of people seem to prefer hands regardless. So I'll just another thing I can remove from bloating the plugin. So I'll get rid of that. Oh, yeah. Weapon character, grip dropper, use object. Oh, no. It's in the gun blueprint. I changed up the gripping structure so that now instead of all the secondary grip properties being in the main, they're in their own struct within the gripping structure. So this, for one thing, allows me to lower replication costs because if this isn't filled out, there's no secondary attachment, it doesn't have to replicate any of these variables. So that's the saving cost on replication, and it also lets me do some additional properties without any additional overhead on replication as well. So is slot grip for one. Now the secondary grip will return true if it is a slot grip. So if you gripped it as a secondary location and you did it at a socket, then this will be true. So instead of checking transforms on static mesh for the gun to see if I'm at the handle position, now I just check, is slot grip true on the primary grip? And if it's true, then we're held at grip. So that should save a lot of logic. You can still check if slot grip, then let's see if it's this slot or that slot. But normally I doubt people are going to have very many primary slots on an object. And the way that is functional is that in the Vipong character under grip dropper use object, it calls this slot grip here. And then when it goes to grab on the actual grab function, it fills in as slot grip. And down here, the one that was passed into the function. Because I don't know specifically if it is. If the optional snap to socket name is defined and it goes to that, then it'll automatically set as slot grip. Some random person. It's a VR plugin for Unreal Engine with multiplayer, locomotion, full world collision, bunch of stuff. Alright. Now, something I don't think I've ever mentioned in a video, but I can go over here, is it's generally a good idea not to leave miscellaneous objects ticking all the time. So, for instance, it's a console, not the lever. For instance, the button. Where's my button? Testing. Where's the button? Oh, there it is. The button component is now essentially C++, so this is just legacy for people. I'm going to see how I implemented it in Blueprint. So what I do with pretty much all of the interaction components is when they're being interacted with, I turn on ticking for the component, and when they're not, I turn it off. And this will save a lot of overhead over time with the more components that you have in the levels. I highly suggest anything that you make, you start with tick enabled off, and you only turn it on when specifically required, because then it'll never have to call the tick, and you can save a lot of CPU overhead with it. Yesterday under post-process, I added a post-process material here to show off how to do something like per eye textures in VR with a post-process material or a standard material. You could do stereoscopic textures that are applied to things and just use two different textures based on which eye is looking at it. And that is performed by a function, a custom function that was on the answer hub that I modified so that it works regardless of if instant stereo is true or false. So this custom function right here will return which eye is currently looking at the pixel. And so if it's instant stereo, it returns resolved view stereo pass index. And if it's not instant stereo, it returns view stereo pass index. And then it tell you if it's left or right eye, and then it'll change the emissive color on the screen. This is potentially really useful. For one thing, on Reddit I saw a while ago some guy made different colored squares per eye in VR, so that it tricks the brain into thinking that you can see in the dark, but it's still dark to you. It's really messed up. I've actually seen it in random special effects demos, and you could do that with this. You could also do things like just, a portal in your world where you're looking at it and one eye sees it offset from the other eye, so it looks three-dimensional, depending on where you're looking at. I know a lot of people wanted to do like portals where it has actual depth to it, and you could do that with a stereoscopic material that you create using this setup here. It'd take a lot of work and be performance intensive, but you could do it. Let's see. I have a list of things that I changed so far this weekend. I have more I need to do. Categories, unlinked open VR specific code, stereo view index. I mean, that's most of it. That's most of it I don't have stereo portal yet, dude. I don't tend to make gameplay elements if I can avoid it, because I don't want to set a standard for people that'll just copy what I did. Honestly, that's most of it. I don't want to say, hey, this is a melee system for VR, and then everyone uses that melee system. I'd rather make generic functions that perform, and then people can get their gameplay off of it, so that we have more innovation. Like my climbing, I wasn't gonna do climbing because I didn't want to define how everyone does climbing, but it ended up being a fairly intensive thing to do in multiplayer correctly, so I implemented it into this plugin. Oh yeah, the lever component, I'm not done with yet. I got sidetracked with all this week off stuff, but this is the C++ one. It needs some work, but I mean, it's almost there. Alright. Oops. Do this. Does anyone have any questions? I know some people said that they have stuff they've had trouble implementing, and I figure as long as I have the editor open and my source open in the background, I could show people that have any questions how to do stuff. If you grip the VER button, it disappears off into space. Yeah, that was a temporary thing where I had it able to be gripped, because for some reason Epic doesn't have a static mesh component that you can spawn in Blueprint. I don't know why, it just doesn't. You have to base it off of something that's based off of a static mesh component. So I based these Blueprint buttons before I converted them to C++. I based them off of grippable components, and I forgot to set them not to grippable on a very old version of the template right after they were introduced. So you could grip it briefly. I fixed that a while ago. Like, I'm trying to grip this right now and I can't grip it. So it wouldn't be a problem if you just made it not grippable. The new C++ buttons, like what this keyboard uses, let me pull this away from the wall. Depth perception's hard in 2D. So the C++ buttons, like what this keyboard here uses, these ones are not grippable objects, so you can't grip them. I'm just gripping the console behind them. Oh, this is hard in 2D. My headset's too far away from my computer. How does climbing while holding objects hold up? I mean, just fine. You just grab an object and grab onto something with the other hand. Or are you talking about with the object in your hand? You could do that too. I have it disabled with this by default because generally it's going to be in the way. But if you have it so that the trace goes right through it when it's held, it wouldn't care. You could just climb with objects in your hand freely. Something about this plugin is that it doesn't define how many objects you can hold at once. So I was helping a guy debug one of his multiplayer things where he was getting inconsistencies in multiplayer, and so I set it so I'd spawn 500 guns at max that I could hold in my hand and walk around with, and it works. Non-grippable and non-climbable. By default, this has everything as climbable, so people can test it in this template. But you can define whatever you want to be grippable and whatever you want to be climbable. There's no restrictions. You could set default to nothing to be climbable, and then just specific things to be climbable or whatever. Oh, no, it's fine for a template, dude. This isn't a game here. People can change it for whatever they want. I just wanted people to freely experiment with being able to climb on anything, so that they could get a feel for how the system works in multiplayer. In an actual game, people probably override is climbable to return false by default, and if it's specific objects, then they return true. No, you can't climb on an object you hold. You can climb on moving objects like this block. if no one has any questions, then I'll just leave it at that as an informational video for the update that's coming out at the end of this week. I have a few other things I wanted to add. Like I wanted to add that center of mass grip, and I wanted to add a few other things. But I mean, that's most of it. It's mostly cleaning up the character and the character's functions. And then I guess I should finish the C++ version of the lever too. So I will talk to you people. Oh, okay, I want to make a grapple hook. I have a grapple hook. I never finished it because I got sidetracked doing other things. But it exists. Oh man, why is it so small? God, I was playing around with a tiny one. So I wanted to do one that was purely physics based, which probably isn't the correct way to do it for a game. I just wanted to play around with it. I need to set some gameplay tags on this. Okay, so use type on trigger and drop type on side grip. Okay, I should be able to use that now. So the grapple gun grapple gun fires out a beam. It hits something. This is hard to do in 2D. Screw that. Anyways, it fires out a beam. It launches your character up and forward in the direction that the grapple came out in. Then from where the grapple hit, it traces down to the closest floor, and it generates a length off of that, and that's how long it wants the leading line to be, so that you don't hit the floor. It offsets it up a little bit so you can swing around. And then it applies physics forces in the counter direction of gravity to your character, so that you swing along an arc. Let me open up the blueprint for it. This is way more complicated than it needs to be. Most people probably could just take a radius around a center point and move the character along it with a lerp or something. But I wanted to try it with pure physics. So it gets a tether length. This is based off of someone's Spider-Man code that they did for Unreal Engine. And the way I wanted it to work so that it was a little better is that it takes a directional force boost. So it takes the dot product of the grapple location and the character location, determines what point in the swing you're in, if it's downwards or upwards. And if it's downwards or upwards, but it's not over the parallel point in the swing, then it adds in the vector that you're moving at as a force on the output. So that when you're going down a swing or up a swing, you're speeding up slightly. It's kind of hard to describe. I have to show you in VR, but I don't have HDD plugged in right now. But this is needlessly complicated. I don't know that most people would want to do a physics grapple gun. But you could. It'd work basically something like this. From the template from a Steam game will work out of the box. Do I have to go through the Unreal Steam documentation? Unreal has Steam documentation? I mean, it got very little information about doing anything on Steam. I mean, they've never fixed their Steam implementation in Engine. That's why I'm still supporting that Blueprint Steam thing. So yes, the template actually currently as is, you can literally just walk up to this and host a server, and then somebody else can come in and find servers, and it'll show the server on there. You can't because Steam doesn't let you find your own server. But yes, the template itself you can already play over Steam with on App ID 480. And this uses my Sessions plugin that I made to fix a bunch of Blueprint problems with Unreal Engine. So, I mean, it works. It won't work in Editor because in Editor it won't load Steam up. If I launched in, I forgot. I don't usually use one window. If I launch in standalone, then it'll actually load the Steam overlay and load the Steam subsystem. So yeah, you can look in the template, see how it works. I can show you briefly how it works under 3D menu actor. Here's my widgets. 5 3D menu. Yeah, I don't think you'd normally run this in a widget. I don't think you normally run server creation logic, but I am because I was just doing this. So when you press the button for host, it destroys your current session if you have one. It creates one of my advanced sessions with game name, VR server, and public connections, all that stuff. And then it opens level, and then people can find it. So you shouldn't have to do anything special to run on Steam. I mean, this also supports like Steam avatars, get Steam friend avatar, and stuff like that. I don't know. You'd have to look at the Sessions plugin. There's a shit ton of stuff on it. It's almost as big as the VR plugin. Does your plugin support all kind of locomotion? Yes, it supports tons of locomotion. So what I did was I converted the it's not the new character. I converted the Unreal Engine character so that it works in VR, which it normally doesn't, which means that it can use all of the standard 2D character movement options that Unreal supports, and lets you easily add VR locomotions without manually defining, you know, gravity and wall collision and running upstairs and all that stuff. So for instance, on this character, event graph, there's switch locomotion modes. Where am I? Oh, here. Cycle movement modes. So right here, for informational purposes for people, to show them how to do stuff, I've got teleport, navigation, out-of-body navigation. Navigation is just like an AI navigation. You point, and instead of teleporting you there, your character moves there. Some people get less sick than, you know, standard controller-orientated sliding motion. D-pad press is like onward. D-pad press H&D orientate is based on your head orientation, which is what Oculus originally said you should do, but it's usually terrible. So I wouldn't actually suggest people use these, or the hover modes. I hate hover. Run in place is running in place locomotion. Run in place head forward. That's where I would suggest keeping the head orientation, because it's easier to run in place with looking directly towards something. Arm swing is the arm swing that people seem to be using. I don't like arm swing very much. Climbing mode. I have climbing enabled by default, so this doesn't do anything unless you change a variable. But yeah, it supports all these locomotions already implemented for people to look at, plus however many people could do. I mean, I got a low gravity movement mode that I added recently, and where there's no gravity and you retain velocity and stuff like that. I'd like to do this other Rama. Would I need to do all this that Rama suggests to? No. This link broke. 1 second. Using the Steam SDK during development. That link's broken. I don't know what the original URL was supposed to be. But Rama's old post on the wiki, from what I remember, is immensely out of date and not useful. It may be different now. It's not his fault. When he first wrote it, it was the best resource. But I mean, since then, they've made a lot of SDK updates on the engine, and some of the stuff like installing and moving DLLs and stuff is no longer necessary. And I just don't think the wiki's ever been updated for it. Like, I've got full friends functionality in here too, like friends list, get stored friends list. Oh, get and store friends list is what you want. Get and store friends list. And so this is all of your UE4 friends, not UE4, Steam friends. break the friend information, and this is their Steam friends information, like display name, real name, their online state, so online, offline, away, chat, whatever. Their unique net IDs, so you can perform Steam functions with them, and then, you know, a bunch of other stuff. Unreal devs are looking for a plugin that can do that. Spectator mode for streamers. Oh, you mean like mixed reality and a third-person camera? I was looking at doing that in a plugin, and it would be really difficult because Unreal Engine C++ and a lot of stuff's closed off because of that. Obviously, Unity is C#, and it's easier to override base engine functions just because of that. But in 4.17, the new Unreal Engine version coming out soon being relative, a month, 2 months, something like that, Epic has directly implemented the ability for mixed reality and third-person cameras. So it should be very, very easy to set that kind of thing up in the new engine version when it comes out. And saves me a lot of time because I had a method that could have worked but would have required me to basically rewrite the entire plugin for head-mounted displays. So that's why I wasn't trying to do it. Epic said they were going to do it eventually. And they did. They pulled through. They added a lot of new things in this upcoming version. A lot of nice things. There's a sneak peek of what I've been making using your plugin. Oh, I like the art style on that. Asymmetrical is also possible in 4.17, the upcoming version. But what they did is they made it a very really easy way to manipulate what the screen sees. So you can directly draw stuff to the screen instead of the normal headset display. Before, it just randomly pulled in the HMD display and you were kind of locked into that without modifying the engine. But in the new version, there's a lot of different options, including custom textures to the monitor that aren't on the HMD. So you can do like scoreboards on the monitor and mixed reality by mixing monitor feeds. Another camera feed and the HMD feed, or you can do asymmetrical gameplay by drawing a second player's perspective to the monitor, and then the HMD gets its normal rendering. So like I said, everything's really easy in 4.17 for monitor and HMD separated effects and things like that. Now the problem with asymmetrical gameplay is that it's very taxing, because the second player is re-rendering the scene. I'll bet it's in 2D, so it's less resource intensive than the HMD is. It's still another rendering of the screen. So generally games like that would need to be very, very high performance, low polygon, low special effects. I mean, people just have to be really careful what they do with that. It's gonna be a while away until we have, you know, a separate video card working for the monitor versus the HMD. I don't think there's anything that supports that currently. It's more like just one video card per eye on an HMD. Somebody brought up to me 2 days ago that if you go into climbing mode and you don't do anything, there's a little hitch. You just grab and let go. And I need to track that down. It's part of Epic's character movement. And I believe what it is that when you move into falling mode, it doesn't retain the slight offset from the ground that walking does. Walking allows you to be 2 to 4 units at max above the ground, or 2.4 or something like that. Your capsule's not actually touching the geometry, it's hovering slightly above it. So I think when you go into falling, it doesn't have that offset anymore, and it drops below that, and then moves back up when you hit the ground and turn into walking mode again. I should be able to adjust for that by when you go to release climbing mode, checking if you're close enough to the ground that it doesn't matter, and just enter walking mode directly instead of falling mode. But I mean, it's not the biggest deal. Anybody that's standing here doing this is, I don't know, there's something wrong with them. Yeah, you can make asymmetrical online at any point. I mean, you don't need, that right here, this is what this is. If my HMD is not currently plugged in, so it spawned me a 2D character so I could test functions. And if my HMD was plugged in, I'd be in VR right now. So if two people loaded up the same package project, and one had VR and one didn't, then you'd be doing asymmetrical gameplay already. Because one person would be in 2D and one person would be in 3D. What did I set the step up for the... I think I removed it. Alright. Yeah, Darian Smith. When you get something like a trailer together for... I don't know, is that an official trailer that you linked me? You said sneak peek, so I'm assuming it's not... Yeah, it's unlisted, yeah, so that's not an official trailer. When you get an official trailer for that, could you let me know? I'll link to it in the plugin thread on the forums. I'm trying to keep a list of projects that I know about, because there's a ton of projects I don't know about that use the plugin. And I wanted to start getting people invested in each other. So if you get an actual trailer for that together, then let me know. And I'll link it. I got like 3 games that I can't post anything for yet because they don't have any promotional material, but I know that they were going to be releasing on Steam soon. Then I got a bunch of games I know use the plugin, but I don't have any contact with their devs, and I don't want to assume anything, so I'm not posting anything about it. Is there any other questions? If not, then I will cut it here. Okay. I'll probably try to do this again sometime when I do a major feature update. The first time I've ever tried to do a live Q&A about the plugin. But I have a lot more work to do on this week. I'm still off of work for the rest of the week, so hope to bang out some new features. And I guess you guys all have fun and enjoy. I'll see you around.